Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Vishnu Prabhupada Shukadar Shishimad Sarandeshla Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Maharaj ki Anantakoti Vaishnava ki Iskan founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Prams Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhakti Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shalakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan ki Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Navadvip Ayapur Dham ki Jagannath Puri Dham ki Ganga Mai ki Yamuna Mai ki Bhakti Devi ki Tulsi Devi ki Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Brihat Pranaka ki Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki Nitai Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which to attain pure devotional service. It's grace across the ocean that you are suffering and attain the mercy of Krishna. The real motion of my consciousness purifies by the word of the meaning of its motion. Attachment to the perfection is all desire. You built by the heart and eyes, close my heart, and the heart. You give my Lord for the earth. The maker that makes, the destroyer, the scriptures in the terror. Our spiritual master, the ocean of mercy, friend of the poor, our Lord master, the Lord master, be merciful on us. In the shade of the sea, your famous realm of all the world. Be the Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna. This point, we'd like to welcome our online audience as well to our Saturday morning program. We are now going to have Srimad Bhagavatam class given by Grace Vishnu Chitta Prabhu from the Atlanta Krishna Life Temple. Vishnu Chitta Prabhu is the temple president there. And unexpectedly, family is coming today, so sometimes he's one of the things very blessed that the sadhus come visit you. And today we're all very blessed to have him speak to us on Srimad Bhagavatam. So just a little change in the format from our daily Zoom thing. The verse will be displayed for you online. It'll be displayed here in the temple room. Just to keep the flow and everything moving, we'll just for the people chanting the verse. We'll just do it here in the temple room. At the end, there'll be an opportunity for those online to ask questions. Krishna Chitta Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Radha Madhava Puja Bihari
Radha Madhava Puja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Puja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Puja Bihari
Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Swami Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna. Gauravani Puja. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Nishkati. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radha Krishna Sakura. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, titled Creation, Chapter 15, titled The Pandavas Retired Timely, Text 6. Yasya kshanaviyogena loko hya priya darshana
Yuktena rahito shresha उक्तेन रहितो हि शेष मृतः प्रोच्यते यथा लोकेन लोको हि प्रियदर्शनः युक्तेन रहितो हि शेष मृतः प्रोच्यते यथा योगेन लोको हि प्रियदर्शनः युक्तेन रहितो शेष मृतः प्रोच्यते यथा यस्य क्षणयोगेन शेष यस्य क्षणवियोगेन यस्य क्षणवियोगेन लोको हि प्रियदर्शनः तेन रहितो हि एष
Word to word meaning. Yasya, whose, Kshana, a moment. Yogena, Lokaha, all the universes. He certainly. Apriya Darshanaha, everything appears unfavorable. Mukthena, my life. Rahitaha, being devoid of. He certainly. Eshaha, all these bodies. Dakaha, dead bodies. Uchyate, are designated. Yatha, as it were. Translation purport by the Venerable A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: I have lost him whose separation for a moment render all the universes unfavorable and void, like bodies without life. Purport: factually, for a living being, there is no one dearer than the Lord. The Lord expands himself by innumerable parts and parcels as Swamsha and Vibhinamsha. Paramatma is the Swamsha part of the Lord, whereas the Vibhinamsha parts are the living beings. As the living being is the important factor in the material body, for without the living being, the material body has no value. Similarly, without Paramatma, the living being has no status quo. Similarly, Brahman or Paramatma has no locus standi. Without the Supreme Lord Krishna. This is thoroughly explained in the Bhagavad Gita. They are all interlinked with one another, or interdependent factors. Thus, in the ultimate issue, the Lord is the summum bonum, and therefore the vital principle of everything. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Him Dadati Sudhamikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Udasana Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnava Shri Rupam Sagar Jatam Sagara Raghunatha Sad Vedam Savadhutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagara Lalitha Shri Shatan Shri He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurani Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabham Sute Devi Pranamami Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyo Pitanam Bhavam Vaishnava Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravakinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Yasya Kshanaviyogena Loko Yakriya Darshana Uktena Rahito Hyesha Mridakaf Prochete Yatha I have lost him, I've just lost him, whose separation for a moment would render all the universes unfavorable void, like bodies without life. So here Arjuna is replying to Yudhishthira Maharaj's question on seeing, so Yudhishthira Maharaj upon seeing Arjuna being, looking very distraught and looking like pale, without, and very grief-stricken. Yudhishthira Maharaj becomes very concerned and asks a series of questions. And in the end, his question pertains to Krishna. What happened? Something happened. What happened to the Supreme Personality of God? Basically, that was his question. And Arjuna, in the verse before this breaks, was saying that the Supreme Personality of God has left. Krishna has left the planet. He has left this earth. So the thrust of this purport here is that the Supreme, that there is nobody dearer to the living entity than the Supreme Lord Himself. And what is being spoken of in this purport is about separation, which is a very interesting subject matter, and one that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas under the lineage of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu emphasize very much, that separation from the Supreme Personality of God actually gives one more bliss. So the Acharya state and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu states, then even associating with him, or actually in separation of the Supreme Personality of God, the pure devotee is associating with him, but is associating him with him in the pain of separation from him. So in this regard, and one of the main takeaways of this particular chapter is how Arjuna is handling the separation of Supreme Personality of God. Here Arjuna is in a situation, very embarrassing situation, where this great warrior, he's the greatest warrior on the planet, the greatest fighter on the planet, and he is lost to a bunch of dacoits who could not protect his most beloved, loved ones who were in Dwarka. There were women, there were old people like Ugrasena and others, and these dacoits just kidnapped everybody from Arjuna. Of course, Acharya has explained that this is just the pastime of Krishna, where this is how he takes the residents of Dwarka back to Godhead. And this is how the residents of Dwarka disappear from this physical realm that is perceived to us. But in any case, Krishna has interesting ways of doing things. Generally, the stories that are a little more, what you could say, appeasing to conditioned souls like myself, is if a Pushpaka Vimana was to descend and everybody was to get into the Pushpaka Vimana and rise up to the Vaikuntha planet. It's a very wonderful scene. These things also happen, as in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, or it is also said in the case of Lord Ramachandra. That is how the residents of Ayodhya disappeared along with him. They all went to bathe in the Sarayu River, and from the Vaikuntha planets, the Pushpaka Vimana descended, and they all ascended the Vimanas, the flying airplanes, and they all ascended the spiritual world. So it's a very wonderful scene. It's definitely more pleasing to a conditioned heart like myself than to hear this. It's like, oh my God, that's the supreme. I mean, Supreme Personality of Godhead has his ways of doing things, and it's for a person like Arjuna, it's still painful what he went through because he's trying to protect her. He is well read, he's a pure devotee, he understands this is all the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of God. Still, it is embarrassing. I mean, Arjuna was about to, kill his brother Yudhishthira because he spoke against he just said, what's the use of you having the Gandiva bow if in the middle of the battlefield? It's described in the Mahabharata that Arjuna and not in the middle of the battlefield, it was later. During one of the evenings after the battle, Arjuna and Yudhishthira get into a little bit of an argument, and at that point of time, Yudhishthira just out of frustration, little anger, he just says, "What is the use of you having this Gandiva bow?" Arjuna gets very incensed. He's about to kill and when Krishna stops him, he says, "No, I've taken a vow to kill somebody who insults my Gandiva bow." His bow, what to speak of his own honor, it's just his bow. Arjuna gave so much value to the Gandiva bow. And anyways, Krishna tells him, well, he's your older brother, you can't kill him. And if you kill him, then you have to kill yourself. Then what will you do after killing him? You, out of regret and shame for killing your own brother, you will kill yourself. So he said, so what do? Is you just, another way of killing a person is to just speak in a derogatory way. So you just insult Yudhishthira. So he insults Yudhishthira and then he feels bad. So he said, okay, you insult yourself. Now, and then he insults himself with the issue and settles. One exchange in the Mahabharata. But the point I'm trying to bring is how Arjuna gives so much importance to his Gandiva bow. And here in this chapter, you will see how Arjuna, it just says his Gandiva was useless and powerless against these dacoits. So it's something very, it's everything, right? It's his whole life. So his honor, his dignity, he's a Kshatriya. And for Krishna to do that to Arjuna is amazing, to say the least. Now, but that's where Arjuna, this is how Krishna is bringing out the glory of this body. That Arjuna, in spite of being a Kshatriya, who was the greatest, warrior on the planet, who for the greatest warrior to lose to a bunch of dacoits is worse than that. I mean, it would have been better if they had killed him, rather than him being alive. But this is how we can understand how Arjuna is just above any of this worldly honor and shame. None of that mattered to Arjuna. What mattered to him was that his friend, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his dearmost friend, had left the planet. And he's seeing everything in just relation to that. So there's, even though Arjuna, if we can, if you read the previous verses, he's saying that, or in the previous verses, 2 verses before, he says, remembering Lord Krishna, it said, remembering Lord Krishna and his well-wishes, benefactions, intimate family relations, and his chariot driving, Arjuna, overcome and breathing very heavily, began to speak. And the verse before that says that with great difficulty he checked the tears of grief that smeared his eyes. He was very distressed because Lord Krishna was out of his sight, and he increasingly felt affection for him. Although these feelings of grief and separation could seem very similar to how somebody would, somebody just loses their loved one, they would also probably cry like this. And in this regard, I want to compare a few things from the Srimad Bhagavatam. So right now I'm pulling up Canto 11, Chapter 7, text 18. So here in Canto 11, chapter 7, Lord Krishna is instructing Uddhava. And here, Arjuna at the beginning of this chapter tells Uddhava, listen, what's going to happen? I'll tell you what's going to happen. In 7 days from now, because of the Brahmana's curse, the others are going to fight amongst themselves and kill each other. And in 7 days from now, the ocean is going to rise and inundate water. Then Kali Yuga is going to begin, the worst of all ages. People are going to be very sinful. Uddhava, you should not stay. Give up your family, give up your relations, take sannyas. Basically, he was asking Uddhava to take sannyas. And Uddhava, upon hearing this instruction of the Supreme Lord, he replies in text 18, therefore, O Lord, feeling weary of material life and tormented by its distress, I now surrender unto you, because you are the perfect master. You are the unlimited, all-knowing Supreme Personality of God, whose spiritual abode in Vaikuntha is free from all disturbances. In fact, you are known as Narayana, the true friend of all living beings. So, Uddhava, being a pure devotee, immediately accepts Krishna's instruction. So, okay, I'm going to do it. You said, you asked me to do it, I'm going to do it. Then, in the 19th verse, Supreme Lord replied, generally, those human beings who can expertly analyze the actual situation of the material world are able to rise themselves beyond the inauspicious life of gross material gratification. So this is a very interesting verse. Supreme Lord replies, how can you rise above the grief or the inauspicious life of this material world? Because this material world always has these kind of reverses. It's just the nature of the material world. And Supreme Lord says, human beings who can expertly analyze the actual situation, who can actually analyze it, this is how the material world is. Therefore, there's no point lamenting or crying over spilled milk. Milk is already spilled, this material world is already messed up. You know, but if we analyze how messed up the material world is, it helps us actually arise from it. It's not a cause of depression, it's actually a cause of enlightenment. And in the next verse, Krishna says, an intelligent person, expert in perceiving the world around him and in applying sound logic, can achieve real benefit through his own intelligence. Thus, sometimes one acts as one's own instructing spiritual master. This is very interesting how, if through sound logic and expert perception of the material world, one can benefit themselves. In this regard, towards the end of this chapter, in text 50, Krishna, in a couple of verses after the one I just read, Krishna starts describing Yadu Maharaj. Yadu Maharaj's conversation with the Avaduta Brahmana. So this Avaduta Brahmana just explains to Yadu Maharaj what he's learned from the world. And in text 50, Krishna describes what the Avaduta Brahmana learned from the sun. He says, just as the sun evaporates large quantities of water by its forehead rays and later returns the water to the earth in the form of rain, similarly, a saintly person accepts all types of material objects with his material senses, and at the appropriate time, when the proper person is approached him to request them, he returns his material objects. Thus, both in accepting and giving up the objects of the senses, he is not entangled. So, although Arjuna has instructed Uddhava to give up everything, still, he's explaining the principle. The fact of the matter is, we have this material body, we are interacting, we have these material senses, we are interacting with material sense objects. But the real sannyasi is one who is unattached to these material objects. He accepts them and he uses them and he gives them away, but he's not entangled. So an example that's given is the sun. The sun evaporates large quantities of water by its rays and later returns the water to the earth. So a person in the course of his duties in this material world may have to accept certain things. But if he has sound logic and if he is fixed in the instructions of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, then he can take these objects And he uses them as long as he needs to use them. And then when it's time to give them up, he gives them up. Now, what's the best example of this? This material body itself. See, we have to accept this. One of the things actually spiritual life is to accept that material body is what it is. Like some of our bodies may have certain problems that others don't have. Some of our bodies may be capable of doing certain things, or sometimes our life situation is such that we're in some situation in life. Others around us may not be in such kind of a situation. But one who is focused on worshiping Krishna accepts that material situation and tries to engage himself in Krishna service as much as possible. And then, when it's time to give up the material body, he's ready to give it up. And everything associated with that. So in that sense, he accepts the material body. He doesn't try to. Ours is not a philosophy where, because we understand we're not this material body, we decide to commit suicide. This is not our philosophy. We have to accept the material conditions that we're in. But we have to also understand that these material conditions are inhibitions to our progress in spiritual life, in so much as we are attached to those material conditions. The moment we become detached to those material conditions, detached doesn't mean that we don't interact with it. Detached just means that we accept it as much as needed for Krishna service, and the other and that which we cannot do anything about, we don't worry about it. I mean, we just have to deal with it. Like there's so many examples that could be given in this regard, but because of the lack of time, I want to move forward. So text 51 says, even when reflected in various objects, the sun is never divided, nor does it merge into its reflection. Only those with dull brains would consider the sun in this way. Similarly, although the soul is reflected through material bodies, the soul remains undivided and not material. So none of these material conditions are actually pertaining to our real spiritual condition. Now, this is the next story is what's very interesting. This is why I wanted to actually read this chapter. It's the story of the pigeon. And the Avadhuta Brahmana describes the story of the pigeon, and we can contrast the grief that the pigeon feels with the grief that Arjuna is feeling. It's very different. And so I'm just going to read the translations of these verses. So text 52. One should never indulge in excessive affection or concern for anyone or anything. Otherwise, one will have to experience great suffering, just like the foolish pigeon. So, in the previous verse, Krishna describes the sun, which is also interacting with material objects, but without excessive attachment or affection. Whereas the pigeon is now going to interact with these material objects with excessive attachment and affection. What is the fate of the pigeon? There was once a pigeon who lived in the forest along with his wife. He had built a nest within a tree and lived there for several years in the couple. The two pigeons were very much devoted to their household duties, their hearts being tied together by sentimental affection. They were each attracted by others' glances, bodily features, and states of mind. Thus, they completely bound each other in affection. Naively trusting in the future, they carried out their acts of resting, sitting, walking, standing, conversing, playing, eating, and so forth as a loving couple among the trees of the forest. Whenever she desired anything, O king, the she-pigeon would flatteringly cajole her husband, and he in turn would gratify her by faithfully doing whatever she wanted, even with great personal difficulty. Thus, he could not control his senses in her association. Then the female pigeon experienced her first pregnancy. When the time arrived, the chaste lady delivered a number of eggs into the nest in the presence of her husband. When the time was right, baby pigeons with tender limbs and feathers, created by the inconceivable potencies of the Lord, were born from those eggs. The two pigeons became most affectionate to their children and took great pleasure in listening to their awkward chirping, which sounded very sweet to the parents. Thus, with love, they began to raise the little birds who were born of them. The parent birds became very joyful by observing the soft wings of their children, their chirping, their lovely innocent movements around the nest, and their attempts to jump up and fly. Seeing their children happy, the parents are also happy. So it's all a nice story. But you know, when you're reading this story, you have this gut feeling, oh my gosh, something bad's gonna happen. You always have that gut feeling, right? Even before we read the Bible time, you're reading this kind of fairy tale story. Okay, where's something wrong gonna happen? Because we all know bottom of our heart that something wrong has to happen in this fictional world. But why would you think that? You think that's a wonderful story, let it just end like that. No, because we all know that something tragic has to happen. I mean, it's just the nature of the spiritual world. So when you read the story, you're like, oh man, everything looks so nice. Gosh. But anyways, here's what happens. Their hearts bound to each other by affection. The foolish birds, completely bewildered by the illusory energy of God Vishnu, continue to take care of the young offspring who had been born to them. Text 62. Okay, here comes. One day, the two heads of the family went out to find food for the children. Being very anxious to feed their offspring properly, they wandered all over the forest for a long time. At that time, a certain hunter who happened to be wandering through the forest saw the young pigeons moving about near their nest. Spreading out his net, he captured them all. The pigeon and his wife were always anxious for the maintenance of their children, and they were wandering in the forest for that purpose. Having obtained proper food, they now returned to their nest. When the lady pigeon caught sight of her own children trapped within the hunter's net, she was overwhelmed with anguish, and crying out, she rushed towards them as they cried out to her in return. The lady pigeon had always allowed herself to be bound by the ropes of intense sexual affection, and thus her mind was overwhelmed by anguish. Being in the grip of the illusory energy of the Lord, she completely forgot herself, and rushing forward to her helpless children, she was immediately bound in the hunter's net. Just see how the nature of the spiritual world is. See, although that mother bird knows that she cannot do anything to retrieve her children from that nest, still she rushed towards it and got herself trapped. But this is the nature of how the spiritual world, it creates this what is called as dharma sakata. So what if that mother didn't go to her children, it would seem like she wasn't doing her duty. On the other hand, what is the use of her going and saving her children? Because she can't save her children anyway. She might as well save herself. But then at the same time, what's the use of me saving myself? Like, what's the use of my life anymore? This is this, and you know, poets have written poems and poems about this very what's the word for that? This very tragic nature is a better word. Very tragic nature of the spiritual world, and sometimes it's just like your face is fixed. And then it just feels like this whole ritual was just rigged. It's just rigged to a point of depression. And then what happens? Seeing his own children, who were more dear to him than life itself, fatally bound in the hunter's nest along with his dearmost wife, whom he considered equal in every way to himself, the poor male pigeon began to lament wretchedly. So the male pigeon, the female, obviously the mother being more affectionate to her children and more emotional by nature, she didn't even pause, she just rushed into it. That was the end of it. The male pigeon, being in the male form of the body, he pauses for a second, but he's completely overwhelmed. He says, the male pigeon, alas, just see how I am now destroyed. I am obviously a great fool, for I did not properly execute pious activities. I could not satisfy myself, nor could I fulfill the purpose of life. My dear family, which was the basis of my religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification, is now hopelessly ruined. So, in one sense, what the male pigeon is going through and what Arjuna went through is kind of similar. Arjuna also, his dearmost friends and relatives, they were all kidnapped in front of his own eyes. And what was Arjuna saying? This has all happened because the Supreme Personality of God is God. This has all happened because the Supreme Personality of God is God. He who is the source of all my strength, all my power, all my ability, has left and withdrawn all that power. Why? Because he's the supremely independent personality of God. There is no use for living anymore. or I need to. Without him, there is no use of my existence. Here, the male pigeon, on the other hand, what is he blaming the situation at? He is blaming, he said, I did not properly execute pious activities. This is the materialist. The materialist, even a pious materialist, this is how we know it. That I didn't perform enough punya karma. I didn't go and bathe in this river. I didn't go and perform this puja. Therefore, this is happening. Because the pigeon is still in the illusion that he's the doer. Arjuna is not. Arjuna is not in the illusion that he's the doer. He's the one. What is this pigeon? He's just another pigeon in the forest. He's just another pigeon, male father pigeon. And there was another hunter did his hunting activity, something that just goes on. This is just the course of life in the forest. Arjuna, on the other hand, was a warrior that the planet had never seen. I mean, he was renowned throughout the three worlds. Even the demigods knew of his prowess. Yeah, but Arjuna never thought he was big. He never thought he never thought he was the source of his own potency or abilities. He knew where everything came from. He was a surrendered soul to the Supreme Personality of God. He also experiences grief, but that grief, because it is connected to the Supreme Personality, where it is actually bliss. That's what we're moving towards. Whereas this male pigeon experiences grief, but his grief leads to destruction. What does the pigeon do? So the pigeon is continuing. My wife and I were an ideal match. She always faithfully obeyed me, and in fact accepted me as a portion of the deity. But now, seeing her children lost and her own home empty, she has left me behind and gone to heaven with our saintly children. So, people like this lament, my wife is gone, my children are gone. What's the use of me living? I personally have a grandfather who's lamenting like this every day because my grandmother died. She died in 86. She's 93. I mean, I understand your reflection, but a woman dies at the age of 86. And what do you expect? Like, what more do you expect? Like, he's like, she's not there. Every day lamenting. And just see how this male pigeon is lamenting. I am now a wretched person living in an empty home. My wife is dead, my children are dead. Why should I possibly want to live? My heart is so pained by separation from family life that life itself has become simply suffering. As the father pigeon wretchedly stared at his poor children trapped in the net, on the verge of death, pathetically struggling to free themselves, his mind went blank, and thus he himself fell into the hunter's net. The cruel hunter, having fulfilled his desire by capturing the head pigeon, his wife, and all of their children, set off for his own home. So, the Avadhuta Brahmana concludes, in this way, one who is too attached to family life becomes disturbed at heart. Like the pigeon, he tries to find pleasure in mundane sex attraction, busily engaged in maintaining his own family. The miserly person is fated to suffer greatly, along with all his family members. The doors of liberation are opened wide to one who has achieved human life. But if the human being simply devotes himself to family life like the foolish bird in the story, then he's considered as one who has climbed to a high place only to trip and fall down. So, in this way, we can understand that there's a great difference between the grief that Arjuna felt and the grief that this pigeon feels in its mundane attraction to its family members. And but people who are without the signs of Krishna consciousness cannot understand this difference. We had a Vastu consultant visit our temple trying to renovate things, and this Vastu consultant also helped the LA temple in central New Jersey. So we would call him. And in the course of a conversation, he would say, you see, Lord Rama, his life was miserable. I was like, what? His life was miserable. He was miserable. And he had his Vastu reason for that. That because whatever, the wife didn't stand on the right side of the husband, like didn't stand on the appropriate side of the husband or something like that. Therefore, he cited that as an example. Like this is Supreme Personality of Godhead. Externally, it can seem like the Ramayana is a story of grief. Like externally, it can seem like that. But if it were a story of grief, why would millions of people read the Ramayana on a regular basis? Hundreds of thousands of them read it almost every day today. Every time you read it, when you read some of those sections of the Sita's grief, the difficulty that she goes through, it evokes tears, and almost every time it's almost difficult to stop crying. But then you still read it again, still read it again, still read it again. That is proof that the Ramayana is not some mundane grief story. It's not like one of these. I can't think. I was trying to think. Is there any famous like mundane grief story out there that people like really know? Like it's famous. Romeo and Juliet, of course, yeah. But how many times can you listen to that? You get sick and tired of it. It's boring. It's like you know everything. But the Ramayana is not like that. We can never fathom the grief that Sita Devi felt. It's not possible. Every time you read, there's a new angle to it. We can never fathom and to relish that, to experience the devotion that Sita Devi felt, the emotions that Madara felt towards Lord Rama, the devotion of Lord Hanuman to Lord Rama, all the thrills and I mean of the different stages of victory in the battle of the Ramayana. And even just right now, there's like sections where what happens is Indrajit, ties Rama and Lakshmana with the I forget the name of the weapon, but of the arrow that he released. It bound Lord Rama and Lakshmana with sundance, and they come. That's it. It's over. And suddenly Garuda appears, and the snakes flee. But at that moment, there's like a sudden period of shock. And oh my God, what is going to happen now? But this is not some mundane story. The Ramayana is filled with pure devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and this is what devotees live for. This is what devotees live for. They die for this. They live for this. This is what they. And then ultimately, the Ramayana it's a story of great bliss. But people who think that material sense gratification is all and all, they will never be able to understand these pure emotions that devotees feel for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is what we pray. I mean, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 7, text 81, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says to Ishwara Puri, his spiritual master, Kiba mantra dila goshai, kiba dana japite mantra kari lama dana. My dear Lord, what kind of mantra have you given me? I have become mad simply by chanting this Maha mantra. Purport: Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu plays in the Shikshashaka. We chanted this morning as well. Udahitam nimeshana chakshusha pravashayikam shunyayikam jagat sarvam govinda virahena. Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain. I am feeling all weighted in the world in your absence. Prabhupada writes here in this purport, it is the aspiration of a devotee that while he chants the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, his eyes will fill with tears, his voice will falter, and his heart throb. These are good signs in chanting the holy name of the Lord. In ecstasy, one should feel the entire world to be awakened without the presence of Govinda. This is a sign of separation from Govinda. In the material world, in material life, we are all separated from Govinda and are absorbed in material sense gratification. Therefore, when one comes to his senses on the spiritual platform, he becomes so eager to meet Govinda. Without Govinda, the entire world becomes a big place. So Arjuna, the moment he realized that the Supreme Personality of Godhead left, there was no use to any of the honor or any of the prestige or any of his abilities that he had carried within the material world. Everything became useless. The entire material world became something undesirable. He didn't desire it anymore, and therefore you will see in the end of this chapter, the Pandavas just leave. They just leave Draupadi also. They all decide to leave the palace. and they do it in different ways, little different ways. But that's the point, that we have to come to that platform and we have to chant the holy names and pray that we feel these feelings that Arjuna feels. It's not that, unlike what this so-called pious Hindu Bhai told that our Rama is just suffering. No, we want that. We want to not, we don't want to experience any pleasure in this material world sans Krishna. That if there's anything that we have to do in this material world, where without it being connected to Krishna consciousness, then we don't have anything to do with this material world. We have to aspire to come to that platform. Actually, as a devotee gradually advances in Krishna consciousness, he starts to realize how this entire material world is without Krishna, is a place of suffering, and therefore he decides to always be the association of devotees, you know, and always is chanting the holy name, because that way he's going to associate with Krishna. Otherwise, if he's not able to chant, or if he's not able to remember Krishna, that is coming from the devotee. It's not like whether he goes to hell, whether he's born in a high. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Mama Janmani Janmani Ishware Kamata. He's not afraid of repeated birth, but what the devotee is afraid of is birth where we forget Krishna. Because that sort of birth is worse than hell, even if one may be born in the highest planet in this material world. And therefore, you know, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study of Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 18, I'm going to just go 2 more verses and I'm going to conclude my class. So text 57, chapter 18, text 57. Chetasa sarva karmani mai sanyasya matpara buddhi yoga upashyatya machitta sadanam mala. In all activities, just depend on me and always work under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, now one may argue that Arjuna was acting under the personal direction of Krishna, but when Krishna is not present, how should one act? If one acts according to the direction of Krishna in this book, as well as under the guidance of the representative of Krishna, then the result will be the same. So we see how Krishna acted when Arjuna acted when Krishna when that. So Arjuna is following those instructions. He's following the instructions. He's always Krishna conscious because he's always thinking of Krishna. And this is how the Bhagavad Gita, this is how the Srimad Bhagavatam elucidates. Over here, one may argue Arjuna was acting under the personal direction, but when Krishna is not present, how should one act? Oh, Arjuna, it's easy for Arjuna to follow Krishna because Krishna was present there. But no, there was a period when Krishna was not present with Arjuna. How did Arjuna act? You can see that. So everything is explained in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is the great benediction that Srila Prabhupada has given us. He's explained this so in such a wonderful manner, in such a lucid manner. And we're very fortunate to be under the shelter of His divine grace. And all we need to do is follow His instructions, chant our 16 rounds attentively, and develop taste for the holy name, read His books, follow the 4 regulative principles, and faithfully try to fulfill His orders, try to fulfill His instructions, and everything will become auspicious for us. So I'll conclude the class here. I pray that with my few words, I please the devotees assembled here, especially senior devotees like Vijay. So if there's any questions or comments.
You mentioned, Prabhu, that especially in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, there's attention to the mood of separation from Krishna, and you quoted that Yugayitam Nishena, and that is even greater bliss than, say, meeting, but the separation mode. So then, if that's the case, then why in the Gaudiya Sampradaya don't they celebrate, or we celebrate, the disappearance of Lord Krishna, or the disappearance of Lord Chaitanya?
Why don't we celebrate this?
Yeah, we observe the disappearance of Srila But if it's more bliss, that might give us an opportunity to experience that more bliss.
I never thought of it like that, but as far as my knowledge goes, my understanding, correct me, Prabhu, is that we don't have disappearance as a supreme personality God because we never consider the supreme personality God disappears, because the acharyas they play the act of disappearance by giving up their apparent material body, which is not a material body. But whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead and associates who descend with fully spiritual forms, they don't really have a disappearance in the same way what we call as disappearance of the acharyas and things like that. But we do read about it in the books, we talk about it. So that's my.
You can say the same thing about the appearance. They don't really appear either.
It's true. It's true. It's true. They're always there when we do celebrate. My understanding was just that because to celebrate disappearance like that would probably sound like, I don't know, offensive or something. Maybe, I don't know. It's interesting point. I never thought of it. Yeah.
But it's a fact.
Yeah, but it's an interesting question, definitely.
The appearance of Aman
Acharyas we do.
and I mean, devotees who knew Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur or Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, there's a feeling of loss.
Oh, great.
You were mentioning about the attachment of the, in the family and the husband and wife. Interesting incident took place when Srila Prabhupada was in London. John Lennon and Yoko Ono came to him. And you know what she asked? Can you give me a benediction so that we'll be together in our next lives? You know this?
I did not know that.
So what does Srila Prabhupada say? What do you think?
You always be Krishna conscious.
Then I'm not going to do that. I mean, on the one hand, you see that in the Vedic system, sometimes if the husband died, then the wife, there would be a sati, and that was something celebrated. But not in this case.
Right. He didn't wish more misery upon them. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada, merciful. No, I'll not benedict you with that mercy, with that misery.
Sometimes it said that, when dealing with loss or problems in the family, that when a devotee might seem callous to the situations of grief and things like that. So, of course, here Arjuna is grieving, but this is for Krishna, the separation from Krishna initially, at least. But and then Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the first thing he says, "Nanu sochanti," don't lament. But later we see that Yudhishthira was lamenting. So how does a devotee, what's appropriate in certain family circumstances where the kids die or things like that?
I think this question was asked to Srila Prabhupada regarding Abhimanyu's death, Arjuna's son, Abhimanyu's death. Krishna heard Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. And then when Arjuna's son Abhimanyu died, Arjuna was overtaken with grief. And so why is that so? Why was that so? Did Arjuna not learn the Bhagavad Gita? Why did he not? And Srila Prabhupada's answer was that because it's natural. Srila Prabhupada's answer that was because it is natural. That because as Vaishnavas we accept that we're persons, we actually have affection. But the unlike the grief of the material Vaishnava may feel for his relatives or friends and this and that never deters him from his devotional service to Krishna. It never deviates him. He never doubts the instructions that Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita. He never doubts does God exist or anything like that. You know, it never affects his faith. In fact, if at all, it only furthers his faith in Krishna consciousness. Everything becomes an impetus for the devotee to worship Krishna. Whereas for the materialist, he's plunged into grief and pleasure depending on his material circumstances.
The word there in the last line, nanu sochanti. Sochanti means lament. And anu sochanti. What is anu sochanti? Don't lament. Anu sochanti. Nanu sochanti. Don't go on lamenting. As you said, like anu kirtana can mean continuing or following somebody. So don't go on lamenting, as you mentioned. So go on lamenting so it interferes with your devotional service. So lamentation will be there, but it continues so it disrupts your devotional service.
Thank you.
Let's see the hands up online. So we conclude here.
Thank you very much. Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Couple quick announcements. Today at 1:30, we have book distribution at Rittenhouse Square, 18th of Walnut Street. If you need a ride, we'll be leaving at 1 p.m. after lunch. And then tomorrow is the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And also for those that are joining us online, we invite you every Saturday to come to the morning program here live in the temple. Experience the people with all the devotees chanting deities, very good association. So something to consider. If not, you can still continue to join us online. Hare Krishna.